Welcome to CalmR 103, Speaking and Listening, Chapter 14. This chapter will be discussing many facets of logical reasoning. This chapter has several terms that you'll have to be familiar with. On the first slide, in the beginning of your chapter, it talks about four terms: analogical reasoning, figurative analogy, literal analogy, and logical fallacies. You will find out as we approach the end of this chapter, we'll be discussing actually 14 different fallacies that are out there that we use on a daily basis that we are not even familiar with. So be looking forward to that. The slide then continues on with more terms. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is where you're using data and facts and stats to come to the best conclusion that you can. Possibly, it looks at it as a scientific method of getting to the end of the conclusion, but making sure that you have everything that you can to reach that conclusion. You also, on the slide, talks about generalization, causal reasoning, and sign reasoning. The chapter then goes on and talks about three more terms. Deductive reasoning. This is a little bit different than inductive reasoning, as you can see by the slide here. It's a conclusion that is based on the combination of multiple premises that are generally assumed to be true. So they may not be true. It doesn't have the scientific method piece of it, but it's close, is basically what it's boiling down to. And then you also have syllogism and enthymeme. That's a tough word, but that's where a syllogism with one of the premises missing. So again, the chapter goes in a little bit more detail about what these are. Finally, the chapter wraps up by taking a look at 14, and there's more, but the 14 probably more popular fallacies that are out there, logical fallacies. On this slide, it lists 5 of them. I'll cover one of them with you. A slippery slope. A fallacy that assumes that taking a first step will lead to subsequent events that cannot be prevented. For example, if you start smoking cigarettes, that will lead to you smoking marijuana, which will then lead you to doing cocaine, which will then lead to LSD, and then lead to opioids, and that it's a slippery slope. It just keeps rolling, basically is what it boils down to. So sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's not. Another fallacy. We have post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's one of them. That's a mouthful right there. Argument from silence, non sequitur, false dilemma, and I'll cover the last one, appeal to tradition. It says here, arguing that traditional practices and long-term history is the only reason for continuing a policy. Imagine if they kept that going with the right for women to vote. If they just said, well, no, it's appeal to tradition. The women have never had a right to vote, so we'll just keep that tradition going on. It could be 2018, like right now, and women still wouldn't have the right to vote. So luckily for us, they have been given that right. They were given that right many years ago, and that would be an appeal to tradition, where the lawmakers would just say, hey, let's just go ahead and do the way it is because it's been done like this for the last 200 years. And then finally, the last 4 fallacies that the chapter discusses is bandwagon, red herring, ad hominem, and ad misericordiam. The one that I'll cover here would be red herring, creating a diversion or introducing an irrelevant point to distract someone or get someone off the subject of the argument. If you think about it, politicians are great at that. Any politician running for office will use a lot of red herring because a reporter or an investigator will ask them a question and they'll skirt the issue and they'll bring something else way out in left field into the discussion to try to just circumvent it and say, well, it's not what I'm asking. The interviewer tries to get back on subject, but the politician uses a red herring to avoid answering the question. So logical reasoning has a lot of great information. This chapter is chock full of great info that you can use. I hope you would enjoy chapter 14 and take a few minutes and read through all of these logical fallacies. I think you'll enjoy it. And I'll see you on my next video.